Well, welcome everyone. We're going to call to order our Monday, October 17th, 2022 Village Council meeting. Judy, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Stokes.
I am here.
McQueen. Here. DeVore Leonard.
Here.
Housh.
Here.
Thank you. We are expecting Brown at any moment. Also present is Village Manager Josue Salmeron via Zoom, Public Works Director Johnny Burns, and via Zoom, Chief of Police Paige Birch.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Do we have any announcements?
Yes.
All right.
All right. So at the end of the first, I would like to start off with a note of gratitude. We had a very successful street fair, and it wouldn't be possible without the great collaboration that we have, particularly from. I'll focus on my team because that's what I work with. So Chief Paige Burge, Johnny, Public Works Director Johnny Burns, in their respective teams, we had a very successful event. Over 20,000 people are estimated to have partaken in the activities. Minimal injuries, and I say minimal injuries because there was one incident and one after the event, but overall the event was a great success and wouldn't be possible without the hard work of the police department and the public works team. So I want to thank them for all their hard work. Obviously, Mark Heiss and I were out there from 5:30 a.m. and I saw Mark just going at it all day. So thank you, Mark, and the great work of your team.
If Josue, if you're done.
I have a few more others, but on this topic, maybe.
Oh, fine. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
It really was an amazing event, and you'd never know Johnny's the only one of our team that actually had been through a street fair before. And you never know what it takes to run a street fair until you run a street fair. And I have absolutely nothing but praise for an amazing group of volunteers, an amazing village staff. Thank you so much, Chief Burge. Johnny, thank you so much. I appreciate everything that you did. And for those that don't know and didn't see the newspaper that came out on Thursday, Mayor Pam actually, there was a couple that so loved street fair, they went and took a chance, went out and got a marriage license, and just so that they could, in hopes of finding an officiant at street fair to be married at street fair. And so for the first time ever, we had a marriage at the information booth on Short Street and Xenia Avenue, which was absolutely amazing. And it really speaks to how much street fair means to a lot of people. And so I really, really cannot tell you how grateful I am. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So Mayor Pam might have started a trend.
Yeah, well, we'll let it be a trend. We'll find somebody next year.
I have a few more. October 29th, the Youth Center is having a field trip. So for those of you who are watching at home, we have another opportunity this year for the youth field trip. The information for how to sign up and what the field trip is, it's online. Visit our website. It's also posted on social media. So that's October 29th. Third up announcement is Beggars Night is happening again this year. It's scheduled for October 31st. So a bit of good news and some not so good news. The good news is we'll continue to sponsor the bonfire activities where we provide the wood and the firewood and hot dogs, condiments, so we'll do that. We're reaching out to folks who've hosted community bonfires and see what events are happening this year. The not so good news is last year we hosted our own activity. We're not in a position to do one of those again like we did last year, so we'll focus our efforts on the community bonfires and support those activities, support the activities of police department and those of the fire department.
Okay, I've got a few things that I'll add into the mix.
Brian, can you hold just a second?
Yeah.
Do we need people to host, or are they already lined up?
Well, we're reaching out to the folks who hosted in the past. Last year we had 3, so we'll reach out to those, and if we'll put out an announcement for more. Are you interested in hosting one in West Davis? Okay.
Either Triangle or the Davis Street. Whatever.
Okay. All right. So we got you down, Marianne.
You have more?
No.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight, we had a really great Wheeling Gaunt Day celebration on Saturday, and I want to thank the 365 Project and all the organizers. Really great feedback and a lot of great education. Also, we did have last Monday Indigenous Peoples Day, so I wanted to just highlight the village's commitment to that particular celebration. Big support for street fair. Two things I wanted to mention was the bike valet parking, and we love to encourage people to bike into town for street fair. Did really well. We were full at one point, and we had a donation from Sue and Bob Swaney of a classic Raleigh bike that raised $490 that is going to go towards downtown bike parking. So Bike Yellow Springs, we'll talk more about that. One of the things that I think Mark and the Chamber and others know is that I again thought Street Fair went really well, and I see a lot of opportunities for making our Street Fair more sustainable. And some of those things are around more reusable cups, better food packaging. I'd like to encourage the Environmental Commission to think more about this, but I think these are opportunities for making sure all of our vendors and participants understand our village values, and I think there's a lot that we can do. I had some good conversations with Greene County Public Health about things like using the reusable cups. Hey, I wanted to say it was Judy's birthday last Sunday.
Happy birthday.
Super old now, thank you.
All right, should we sing? Okay.
Oh, no.
Big, you reached a milestone, is that right?
Yes, I'm 40, thank you.
All righty, that's a big milestone.
Congratulations.
No, thanks.
Yeah, and I think the last two things I wanted to mention are between now and our next council meeting, we have budget sessions on October 29th, starting at 6 p.m. Or I'm sorry, October 27th at 6 p.m. and November 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Those are open to the public, and we've got, I think, some really good focus on how we're going to make those sessions productive and targeted around particularly our infrastructure needs. And the last thing I want to say for folks that have started to vote, issue 2 is about a lot more than non-US citizen residents voting. And I want to thank Mayor Pam for being able to pitch it with the press recently around why the majority of our citizens voted to allow this, like many other home rule states. But really what you're voting about is the fact that local control is supposed to be what Ohio is about. And the fact that our Republican supermajority continues to degrade home rule is anti-Ohio, and it's something that I don't believe anyone should support. So thanks a lot.
All right, well, thanks for all that, Brian. Those were very, very key announcements. We appreciate that. All right, we're moving on to the consent agenda. In the consent agenda, we have minutes from September 29th, special joint meeting, and also the minutes of the October 3rd regular session. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes of September 29th special meeting?
I move.
Can I get, all right, it's been moved and seconded. Judy, could you do this by consent?
You can
Hooray.
say
All in favor? Say yay.
Yay.
All righty, thanks. All right, next item on the consent agenda would be the minutes of our last regular session. Can I get a motion?
I move. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Now we're down to reviewing the agenda. Are there any items on the agenda that are to be moved, or any items that need to be added to the agenda? All right. Hearing none. Man, we're,
Oh, and old business, right?
You have to put it on the agenda.
Right. So in old
Now.
business, thank you. Old business, Ellis Pond cleanup. Thanks, Marianne.
all right. Ellis Pond cleanup and old business. Anything else with the review of the agenda? All righty. So we're moving on to petitions and communications. Mary Ann?
Got a communication from the Greene County Board of Health that the COVID numbers are down in Greene County, even though I think the Yellow Springs, it might be up according to the,
Sanitary flows or at the viral load at the waste station, it's up.
Just on that point, is there typically a delay, what you see at the sanitary station and then before it shows up somewhere else?
Right, the system is meant to be the early detection signal of when cases come on, so you will see a viral load spike at wastewater treatment facilities before you see the uptick in case numbers and confirmed cases.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Thanks.
Gyamfi, Gyamerah had a communication regarding busking to support the Public Arts and Culture Committee survey and include buskers in whatever decisions are being made. The mayor had several reports that included the fact that over the last quarter, there were 5 court sessions with 8 cases total, 4 weddings and 1 proclamation. The Greene County Public Health had a communication about National Teen Driving Safety Week, October 16th to 22nd. Matt Raska had a communication about the busking ordinance, opposing it and feeling it would have a negative effect on downtown. Fritz Schuermeyer had a communication about the noise ordinance with some suggested additions. And Randolph had a communication supporting the existing conservation easement on the Sutton farm without solar. Brian Housh had a white paper on transient guest lodging in the village, implications and suggested updates to the requirements, and that we review our requirements. Krista Magaw had a communication opposing solar on the Sutton farm and suggesting the possibility of having it on the Glass farm. And Brian had a communication, a summary of the meeting that he, Marilyn Moyer from the Township Trustees, and Judith Hempfling from the schools had to continue the joint triumvirate meetings. And that's it.
All right, great. Thank you. I've been calling that group the trifecta, but I guess we got to come up with something eventually. But thank you, I appreciate that. All righty. Moving into public hearings and legislation, we've got the second reading and public hearing of ordinance 2022-34. Judy, if you could read that by title only, please.
Yes, this is repealing Chapter 634, noise control, and replacing it in its entirety.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second? Second. Thank you. That was me asking for a second. Thank you. I appreciate that. All righty. Josue, is this
Yes,
you? Yes.
we can go through the document. I know we did a presentation at the last hearing. I'm being joined with Chief Burge. One of the primary things that we're trying to do in this ordinance is simplify both the enforcement activities, the requirements for enforcement, and the procedures. And that's what we accomplished with this ordinance. The last one was cumbersome with all the training requirements, the reading requirements. This gives Chief Burge the tools necessary to do the enforcement and will streamline the process. So I'm happy to answer questions you may have. Chief Burge is on the line as well to answer any questions. Are there any questions or concerns?
Now I guess it's a question, observation, that I think Well, I live just a couple houses off Xenia Avenue, and to me, about the loudest noise is motorcycles going through town. It's very startling, very loud, I find it very obnoxious. But my understanding is it's also very difficult to do anything about that. So that's the question. Is it possible to do anything about it, or is it just something we have to basically accept?
Chief Burge, can you add some commentary to that, please?
Is muted.
Oh, did you mute everybody? Just a second, Chief.
You should be able to unmute, Chief. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there's
Multiple times.
Yeah. So that's great. Essentially, what it comes down to is, I hear that terrible echo. I'm sorry. Is there any way to prevent that?
I don't know what's
Everyone
causing
else.
the echo.
Yeah, everyone else should be muted,
Do
right?
you have your phone and your computer on?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I don't know what's causing the echo because everyone else is on mute. Yeah.
But Judy's isn't on mute.
Judy's laptop is not connected via the. She doesn't have any sound going through there. How about I mute?
Okay, how's that?
We're gonna mute ourselves, so maybe that helps the issue.
Okay, sure. All right, so I'll try and work through it. So that's a great question. So this noise ordinance obviously isn't specific to the motorcycle noise. We have a couple other ordinances that address that specifically. But your question was about whether something could be done about it. And I mean, there's something that can be done about anything, I suppose, that we have a law supporting us to enforce. But what I will say is when it comes to, and I'll cite this ordinance, even though it doesn't apply for motorcycles, you know, one thing that we always consider with noise ordinance is intensity and duration. So just shy of having an officer set up on, let's say on a Saturday afternoon for 2 to 4 hours, just waiting for motorcycles to come by, making the excessive noise where we could then make a traffic stop for either a muffler that's been modified or for excessive noise, which is possible. However, just like with anything else, when we're present, that alone deters the activity. So we would already be deterring the activity when we go to the area. And it's just a matter of whether that's something that we would have the resources to spend on a busy Saturday. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Marianne, that's typically the time frame that they occur, right? Saturdays through the village.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Marianne, if you recall, as when we introduced this ordinance, we were particularly looking at the reoccurring ongoing noises, the amplification, the event. This noise ordinance doesn't specifically target motorcycle and other vehicular noises. So the intent of the ordinance has a different focus. So I think given that the intent is different, it's difficult to use this ordinance to regulate
Thank
motorcycle
you.
noise.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
Mhm.
But at that point, there is a provision in the ordinance that does reference, you know, car motorcycle noise. I will say that, you know, signage has been talked about in the past. And that do you have some other ideas around what other communities have done in terms of, you know, forcing things like the retrofitting that is illegal, motorcycle noise? I think the challenge that we heard from Chief Carlson was, you know, how those things could potentially escalate. So I think we should continue to talk about it, but it is challenging. And while I have the mic, I do want to mention not an issue with the ordinance, but when I looked at the police protocol, Chief Burge, I wondered if maybe modifying the thing about if a decibel device is being used, it says right now it needs to be issued by the police department. And I wonder if that's limiting in the sense that I know, there are apps on the phone now. Maybe that could be modified to also include, like, if it's an approved app by the department, so I don't know, just look at that in particular, because I know that's more of like a backup check, but I've gotten the impression that as technology has evolved, that might be a good way to sort of modify that.
Yes, she should be.
Okay, I see.
Yep.
All right. So thank you for that, Brian. And Chief Burge, I assume you made note of Brian's comments. Did you want to reply now or just come back with us later? She's good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for that. Any other comments from council? All right, since this is the second reading of this ordinance, we're going to open the meeting for the public hearing portion of the meeting. Do we have any comments from citizens? All right, seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing. And if there's no other comments or concerns, we're going to go ahead and put the issue to the vote.
All right, Brown.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, legislation has passed. Moving on to an emergency reading of ordinance 2022-35. Judy, if you could read that in by title only, please.
This is a 2022, actually fourth quarter, correct?
Yes.
Fourth quarter supplemental appropriations and declaring an emergency for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, and I will change that before it gets signed. Thank you.
All right, can I get a motion?
Move.
Is there a second? All right, Josue, I presume you'll take call.
Yes, yep, this
you.
is me. Thank you, Kevin. All right, before you is a supplemental for the fourth quarter in the amount of $386,052. The number looks that big because the way the transfers work, we have to count it twice, as an expense from where it's being transferred and as an expense where it'll be paid out of. So that's that $174,805 expense that has to be recorded twice. So, but I'll start from the top. We've got, we're adding some funds to the mayor's court clerk training, accounting services, and I've included the quote for the accounting services in the amount of $15,000. Annual budgeting software, this is something we've been talking about for a while, and we have the opportunity to get it off the ground now. I've got a team ready to go to help us with this, so I'm putting that budget request in there for $11,000. We've had some unexpected vehicle maintenance, and I suppose that vehicle maintenance is both unexpected and expected as it happens to vehicles, in the amount of $4,253. We have a request for special events for the youth center of $1,326. I want to make a note of this, that these are funds that the youth program raised through parking fees and tips. So I want to thank all the people that tipped at the beer garden, because all those funds went to the youth center. Then we've got that sewer relining project. We've been talking about this for a couple months. The current contract that we have for sewer relining, the cooperative purchase agreement expires at the end of the year. We're looking at a rate adjustment. I put in my memo that is going to be greater than 10%. We haven't heard back from the negotiating team what that final number is going to be. I spoke with Johnny this morning, and we expect it to be over 30%. So we're not sure what that rate's going to be. We know what we can count on today, and what we can count on is that rate that we have, and I included that quote for your review as part of the supplemental, and that constitutes our fourth quarter supplemental. Quick note on how we're going to fund the $251,000 that it's going to cost us to reline those sewers. That's $76,804.08 are coming out of the 304 sewer improvement fund. That's funds that are already available in that budget. So we're going to bring in $174,805 from sewer fund 620, which is our operating fund. So we'll do that as a transfer to 304. So the net expense for the sewer relining is going to be $251. We've got 76,804 already in the budget. We need to bring in that additional 174,805. Any questions on the supplemental?
I have a few things if nobody else is waiting in the wing. On that last point, I don't know if it's been updated yet, but when I looked at the official supplemental document, it seemed like the wrong number was in the capital fund piece. It looked like both were 174-ish. So if that hasn't been updated, I just wanted to flag that because I think that one, right, one's supposed to be 74 something.
Let me see, I'm looking at it now.
So the one that's more in a tabular format is.
I'm looking at it now. So on 602, sorry, 620, having 174.
Because right, one of those is supposed to be 74 and one's supposed to be 104.
So I'm gonna pull it up and share it on the screen.
Okay, it might have been updated, but what we had in the packet had those numbers duplicated. So
all right, so I'm at the budget now. So you're saying in 620 or 30 or 304, Brian?
you told us 304 is the one that's 70, supposed to be 74 or something.
So the way this supplemental works, you've already approved 295,000 to be spent out of the sewer capital fund for the year. We're going to add 174,805 to that expense budget in 304. So that with your approval, we will be able to spend up to $469,805. So this expense, this 174 money, is money we're bringing from the sewer operating fund, which is down here. Right now, we have authorization from council to spend 1,100,000. That's right, the number, yes. $1,111,111. We're going to add 174,805 to that expense line item. This is going to be a transfer. So we book it as an expense into 620. So that as we add that amount to expenditure, brings the total expenditure to $1,285,916. So this money gets spent out of 620 and gets brought in over to 304 as a transfer, and then we're spending that additional money in this in the fund 304. The 74,000 or is already, council has already approved us to spend that money. We just found it available for us to use it for the sewer relining project.
Okay, that's clear.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, on the car expense, so 4,000 plus is a lot of money to spend on a vehicle. So I'm just wondering, understanding a little bit more about why that investment makes sense versus, you know, moving that vehicle on.
The vehicle, the engine and transmission have less than 100,000 miles. So the vehicle, the engine and transmission is certainly expected to go many more miles. The issues that needed to be replaced on it, there was a radiator, there was a control arm, one of the part of the steering mechanisms, and some bushings. And Johnny, I think I saw you turn on your video. So we talked about that internally. It makes sense to fix the car because it has plenty of miles left and someone else on the team can still use the vehicle. Johnny, did I miss anything on that?
This is for two vehicles, not just one. Administration did not have any money in the budget line, and they actually had two cars at the time this expense was made. Now they have one.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so I assume that was thought about, so as long as that was considered. And then the last thing, I just wanted to make sure the public understood that part of that money that we've been able to raise for the youth center is from our parking lot on Dayton Railroad, which we've been using traditionally with street fair to support the youth center. And that's premium parking, and I'm glad it continues to raise money for a good cause.
Thank you, Brian. And there's a note for all the volunteers, thanking the volunteers that help our youth program that day, and the manager's report.
So, but,
Okay. So, so the vehicle maintenance for 4253, so where is that on the, like, I guess I was a little surprised that we don't already have a maintenance fund, like, and I didn't see it on the supplemental, so I just wasn't sure, like, is it just that it was such a large expense that we didn't have that much budgeted for?
We didn't have any vehicle maintenance budget in the 2022 appropriations budget. So we
Okay.
had the expense, and so we need to put money in there.
Okay.
In terms of where it rolls up in the supplemental, it gets grouped in together with everything with all the other items that are related to the general fund expenditures.
Okay. So we didn't have money budget, it was just an oversight. We should, I mean,
We should have money budgeted every year for vehicle maintenance.
got it. Okay, thank you.
well, as I've alluded to before, I think we're getting better and better every year, with our budgeting process. Certainly this year, starting as early as we have and having as many meetings set aside. So we suspect we'll certainly be better next time as a result. All righty. Any other comments from council on this issue? Judy, with an emergency, should open it to the public?
Yeah, you actually don't have to by charter, but we always do it, so.
Okay, all righty. We'll open up the floor to the public if there's any comments or concerns about the emergency reading of this ordinance. All right, hearing or seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we will put this to the vote.
All right, DeVore Leonard,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Now we're going to the first reading of ordinance 2022-36. Judy, if we could have that by title only.
All right, this is ordinance 2022-36, creating a new chapter 635, regulating public performance.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, the item's been moved and seconded. Not sure who's master of this particular one.
You want to cover it?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a little bit on this. This was sort of started out with Public Arts and Culture Commission coming to council and suggesting changes that they'd like to see for the performers agreement and sort of ways that they saw to smooth the relationship and add to that agreement. The conversation then internally led to, well, what is it outside of that performance agreement that can be done from a legislative perspective? Because the performers agreement card states that if a performer isn't following respectfully the tenets of the card, the police can be called. And that is actually not the case, because there's nothing in our ordinances that says that the police can at all enforce, you should move along after a certain amount of time or any of those things. So that's why this came legislatively, and I think that caused a bit of a stir last time because folks were feeling as if it wasn't responsive to what Public Arts and Culture Commission had been suggesting. So we really have two pieces. One is the performers agreement, which does need to be updated, I think should be, and I know that that's being worked on within that group. The other side is if council feels that, yes, we'd like the police to be able to enforce certain aspects of that agreement, then you would want to pass this legislation. If you feel that that is in fact not something that you want to have happen, then you don't pass the agreement, and that caveat is taken out of the performers agreement card.
All right, thank you, Judy. Are there any comments, questions from council?
Yes, my sense is that one of the issues is amplification. And as I read this, that there could be no amplification. So that means anyone with any kind of like a car or some guy, I think, who has it. So it would only be acoustic instruments or singing. Is that correct?
I believe that's the intent.
No amplification, yes.
So that would change, I mean, I don't pay attention to buskers particularly. But my sense is there are some that use amplification, so that would mean they would not be able to perform.
That is what it says.
I mean, I think we should also underscore that that was a very clear recommendation from the Public Arts and Culture Commission, was no amplification. So, I mean, you know, my sense, and when I look at where we went from an example ordinance to the current draft, is that it does reflect most of the things that we got recommendations for. There may be one thing that's a little bit different, but that was a clear recommendation from the commission.
Right. Thank you, Brian. Any other comments from council? With this being the first reading, we're not required to open a public hearing, but since there's some interest in the room.
I mean, I would like to hear from council. This isn't something that I pay much attention to. And it's not something I'm really particularly interested in, but I know there are people who are, both pro and con. And I guess I'd like to have some discussion up here about what my fellow council people.
Once again, I'll invite questions and comments from council.
So I think that I need to see where the zero amplification, the no amplification recommendation was from. I'll look. I mean, it could be true. I mean, it probably is. But at what point the no amplification thing came in?
We can't pop up those recommendations. I know
Okay.
I forwarded them to Judy.
Right.
We can put those up on.
But I do know one of the things that the PACC absolutely did not recommend was the permitting process, and then also having the potential escalation of people being charged with misdemeanors if they don't follow. I mean, so far the community has definitely kind of, I don't want to say policed itself, but for the most part, with the exception of one particular person who doesn't perform anymore, the issues that I've seen, shop owners say, hey, turn it down. I've seen shop owners say, hey, you need to move along. And that's generally respected. So I haven't really heard of any instances where it escalates to a point where we need to have that interaction between our public safety officers and buskers. But that's just my experience with it.
Go ahead, Gavin.
I pulled up it was in the PAC report. It said amplification in the downtown business area is not permitted. All other locations will allow amplification. Refer to the creative area map.
Okay.
So
we don't have a creative area map though.
Well,
there's one in the there is.
This is from the PAC report.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I guess I'm with the busking and the noise ordinance. I guess I'm feeling like I want to defer a little bit to the people who have used these devices and the question around for decibel level. I don't personally have a problem with amplification as long as it's not too loud. Similar, and I feel the same way at businesses. Like, I don't care if people play music. I think it's a little bit silly when people play music that you can hear a mile away. So I'm just to your point of, I think I said the last time, this feels like it's not a particular issue. I don't have any reason to believe this is a significant issue, so I'm generally don't have strong opinions about it. But the idea of if it was possible to let people do things at a reasonable noise level and then to have some way to ask people to turn it down, then that would be great. And the other part, I am definitely not in favor of having there need to be a police presence for an issue that, again, I don't have any reason to believe that there's any substantive problem.
Was it possibly the intent of the Public and Arts and Culture Commission in putting together their recommendations, that the specialized areas that would be set aside where there could be amplification used? Was that?
I think that was the idea. I was at one of those meetings, and I think the discussion was just, hey, if there could be a spot at the Bryan Center that's designated that everybody knew, you could go down there and you could play. I would still argue that there should be some noise limitation even in anywhere, just because there's an amplified area doesn't mean you should be able to play your music as loud as humanly possible. So anyway, one way or the other, there's got to be some limitation, one would think. Again, I don't know. I'd leave it up, I guess, to Paige or others that have worked with this technology to know how complicated of a prospect is it to ask people to be within quote unquote reasonable. I don't know how hard that is.
One of the things that just speaking back to what I've observed, and thanks for bringing that up because I didn't realize it, but one of the things that I've observed, having the experience of, being downtown, whatever, I'm down there all the time. When there is an issue with amplification, then the public and shop owners, when it gets to be too much, say, hey, turn it down. So it's self-regulating. And I don't think that it's absolutely necessary for, like I said, the police component piece or the permit piece. I don't know when we've ever had a real problem, except for when a particular musician played his amplified island drums louder than, it was impossible to hear anything when you were down there but him. And I don't know if we've had an issue since then. I know River plays and if it gets too loud, he turns down. And then if people seem to not be receptive to him, he moves. So there are it's like I said, it's kind of self-regulating. I don't know.
But I'd be interested in hearing what Mark has to say and the chief.
Mark. Okay.
Are we done with council
Oh,
comments?
I'm sorry.
That's
I just
fine.
I'd like
Understood.
to have a.
Yeah, I was,
I mean,
even though,
Kevin,
Go
I
ahead.
will have some comments, but I can wait until others speak.
okay. So we are going to open the floor for public comments. And Mark, if you were ready to come up.
I tend to agree with very few exceptions with Mary Ann and Carmen. It's pretty self-regulating. River's a really great example. He's hard of hearing. He turns it up and he doesn't realize how loud it is. You just walk up and say, hey, can you bring it down? And he brings it down to a reasonable level. There's been one other musician who's a drummer that plays amplified music quite loudly to accompany his drum. It's a hand drum. And that has caused some concern with some of the local business owners, not only in retail, but business owners who have been in the middle of meetings and had to stop their meeting because the people in the meeting say, hey, can you turn that music down? And the guy's a block away. I will say this, and Gavin, to your point about hearing music a mile away, I live a mile away from downtown. The very first time we brought up the sound, it was the future, in the future business for the sound ordinance. I want to say this was maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago. I drove by over at the Trailtown Tavern, and the music was a little loud, but not unreasonable. I talked to Jake, and he said that he's got his folks. They have a sound meter on their phone, and they're trying to keep it at 62 decibels. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I will tell you this, and I've heard this actually one show from that Dave had out of the pavilion. If you have a low cloud cover, and because we have no softscape down Xenia Avenue, it will travel a mile down the road. I could hear the music at Jake's place and the vocalist quite clearly. That has nothing to do with the venue. That has nothing to do with the band. That has to do with some of the physical properties of our village. And this is an open offer, and to anyone, business or council. Some of you know that this used to be what I did for a living in San Antonio. If a business wants some help in learning about ways that they can help mitigate the footprint of their sound, when they have an outdoor event, or buskers want that kind of information, I'm more than happy to help, and feel free to reach out.
All right, great. Duly noted. Mark, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about sound and Mike. So we've got you down. We know who to call. So we'll definitely be calling. Gyamfi, I sense you want to have some comments?
Yeah, it defeats the purpose if you say no amplification downtown. Where's the DEI in that, for amplification musicians? If you designate an area that's not near traffic, you're really defeating the purpose, because buskers are busking for what? For money. So if you say no amplification where the traffic is, there's no DEI for those kind of musicians.
You're referring to foot traffic, I presume?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing the rationale in this at all. And I did talk to Amy, and she's not for that. She's not for absolute no amplification downtown. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. Other than that, I would just say, before you make a decision, before you have a survey, it goes without saying, I would think, that you include the people the survey involved the most, the buskers. So I'm not sure why, Josue, you had a survey done without including the buskers. I mean, that's nonsensical. That's nonsensical. So that's all I want to say. I think everything else was said in my letter in the packet. To have, even if it's one busker, I mean, come on, one busker on this committee who did the survey going forward before you make decisions about busking. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. There's been a lot of...
I didn't do the survey.
Right, there's been a lot of that.
Survey done by
PACC.
PACC, correct.
So that was a Village Council Commission, PACC, that did the survey. Alrighty. Anyone else, any other citizens in the room want to speak to this? Brian, up on this topic, Gary? Okay, coming up, please.
Hi, do I need to introduce myself?
You should.
Gary
as
Zarowski,
everyone should, by the way.
And I'm here just as a citizen. And the one thing I want to comment on that I think is not accurate is the thought that this is self-regulating, okay? Because from my experience over the years, not recently per se, but if I've been downtown and I'm coming out of a shop and I'm talking to someone and there's someone busking and it's way too loud, the last thing in the world I'd ever think about doing is saying something to them, because they're a stranger. I'm not going to confront them per se. It would feel confrontational. What I've done, and I've had experience coming out of town, Tom's, and I just can't talk to the person I'm next to. We've had to walk all the way to Short Street in order to be quiet enough that we can continue our conversation. And I've seen all sorts of people walking up and down the street, avoiding stopping around the busker and whatever. So it might sound odd, but I think it can be intimidating to people. Not that the buskers are intimidating per se, but the mere thought of confronting somebody about what they're doing in public, that it's problematic to you, when it's easier for you to just go somewhere else. Okay, so I think it's misleading to say that, oh, it's self-regulating. I don't think it is. Now, what also might be interesting, if you expanded your survey further to include people walking up and down the street, find a period of time in which there's busking activity and just ask residents, tourists, just people walking up and down the street, whether it's impacting whatever they're doing. You might find some interesting input from that, because that's also a significant segment of affected individuals, and just wanted to point that out. That's all I had to say. And I also just wanted to point out, I have not provided my opinion on the topic. That's on purpose. My opinion of busking, okay? I'm just trying to point out what I find to be further areas of logic in which you can look in this further. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gary.
I wanted to speak to something, just really quickly, and I appreciate your comments. I would never suggest, and I don't think Marianne would suggest, anybody approaching a busker. I use the word shop owners and business owners for a reason. I would never suggest that, that you would approach a stranger. But I will say what I've observed is that when shop owners say something, then it's respected. People move on or quiet down.
So, Gyamfi, you raise a good point about, a 360-degree survey, i.e. the folks who are involved, not just the folks, making decisions and recommendations. So I guess now that we know that the PACC did the survey, I would wonder, if in hindsight, if that was a comprehensive enough survey.
I mean, so I think that the discussion about the survey or the PAC survey happened.
Just a second, okay. Carmen. Lacey, are you picking up Carmen on the mic? Because I know you're pretty far back from the mic.
The PAC survey, I think, happened as I was coming in. I think it was kind of something as we were coming on to council. I think it was something that had already been talked about in the PACC meetings. So a more comprehensive survey, a more well-rounded survey, of course. And I don't think that Public Arts and Culture Commission would have a problem with another survey and a better survey.
Thank you, Carmen. Marianne, what you were about to say?
Well, sometimes things that aren't so consequential seem to take up a lot of time.
Right.
I'm trying to think about this. I mean, when I'm downtown, I would enjoy being able to talk to people I know. Therefore, I try to avoid going downtown on the weekend because it's people who don't live here, and it's mostly probably buskers who are being on the weekend for people who don't live here. So I don't know, maybe we should just say no amplification during the week, and you can amplify during the weekend, and then people who live here don't, or no amplification before 10 a.m. or something or sometime on Saturday, so the people who live in town can go down, hang out, talk to each other, and the buskers and the tourists can come and have
Gavin?
I'm with Marianne. I can't believe we're spending this much time talking about this. The thing that I guess has somebody, this thing Mark brings up is fascinating to me, that if there's like a sound that can travel, even if it's I guess has somebody, so I'll just name it. Trailtown seems like the loudest one. I don't know why. It seems, so has somebody just gone and measured and then talked to the 10 people who came to say they can hear it in their house? And just, this really cannot be worked out without all of us making a bunch of policy? I don't know. I'm whatever the group is okay with. That's the end for me.
Gotcha. Brian, I think you still had comments you wanted to make.
Yeah, but in some ways there have become so many things to comment on. I do want to remind folks that the noise ordinance is separate from the busking piece. And a little bit of historical knowledge, since 6 years ago, when it was the Public Arts Commission, so just 1C, there was a huge downtown business and worker, basically sign-on complaint about busking. All right, so this was a huge problem that we were asked to look at. And part of the reason that the street performers agreement was successful was that Chief Carlson and he trained officers to talk to folks. And, in some ways, it has worked itself out. I think what we need to remember is, number one, we're following a recommendation that's pretty simple, no amplification. This is complaint driven. So, you know, if issues arise or if we realize that it needs to be tweaked, that can happen later. I want to remind council members that our citizens have asked us to look at this, and what Judy and Chief Burge reminded us of, which is, if it does become a problem, there's nothing they can do under the current, you know, lack of ordinance. All right. But that doesn't mean that we're going to suddenly have this explosion and that kids can't busk and that sort of thing. I did want to speak to the permitting piece, because actually Gyamfi brought it up in his letter that some buskers, this is a business for them. And that's why the permitting piece is there, is for people that are busking as a business. And it's going to relate to what we're going to talk about with also having vendors permitted. And I think this is just an issue around, if this is how you're, you know, generating your income and you have tax implications, then it's fair for everybody to pay whatever taxes they should. That's why that's in there. But I think that in terms of what's gone well, that doesn't need to change. This is simply a mechanism that if something doesn't go well, like Gary mentioned, for example, and like we've heard from other citizens, that a complaint call could actually be actioned. And that's, again, with a lot of different qualifications. So I agree. I don't think this is something we need to talk a lot about, right? No amplification. The permitting has a taxation purpose. And then as far as some of the other work around creative spaces, more clarity in communications, that's why we have a commission, right? Is to add that capacity so the council's not doing that work. But I think my recommendation is we don't continue this conversation, because it'll come back and we're going to vote on it next time. And I'm sure we'll have more conversation then.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I will say that I'm going to make a recommendation for the next meeting that we add an amendment to this to have some time periods when there can be amplification.
That's good. And I wonder if the time in between now and the next meeting, if the PACC, having heard the concerns about surveys and whatnot, might want to reconsider some things. All of that being said, we are moving on. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and patience. We're now at citizen concerns. Oh, did I miss something? I'm sorry.
Got the emergency, or not emergency,
Thank you.
but we've got the room.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I guess I have
Resolution.
lost my patience with the legislation. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, everyone. We're now to.
I can just go ahead and do it if you want.
Yeah, please.
So this is a reading of Resolution 2022-60, authorizing the village manager to enter into a contract with Rumpke Incorporated for solid waste management.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have the online agenda that I was looking at that didn't have that on
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
sorry that that's not on there.
Okay. That's what threw me off.
So you looking for a motion?
Yes, we are.
I move.
Second.
All right.
All right.
Somebody can count.
That's me. Thank you, Kevin. All right, so what's before you is the entire bid package for solid waste services with Rumpke. I think you are familiar with the space. It's a very limited space, and with every renewal or new contract, we do our best to try to contain cost. Where we believe there's two great options being provided to us. Of the two options, I recommend that we go with the 5-year contract, because that offers the lower rate for the extended period of time. Prior to council meeting, I also forward my last communication with Rumpke. We've been on the phone and working through things to ensure that we're getting the right services for our residents. So this is the result of the bidding process, and I think this is our best option. with Rumpke. 2 years ago, we suggested an opportunity to look at ways of reducing the total tonnage that goes into the landfill, looking at ways of improving recycling options, improving organic, reducing organic waste into the landfill. Those are activities that certainly we want to tackle, and it happens as part of the ordinance that we'll bring back to council to set the rates for the customer. What you're considering tonight is only the contract, the business relationship between us and Rumpke. Rumpke, in this case, works for us and picks up our solid waste and recycling. We will come back to council with an ordinance that outlines the rates and services directly for our residents. So this is the business relationship side of things. Are there any questions or concerns on the business relationship? Just to highlight what the business relationship is, there are 4 tiers. There are 3 residential tiers plus a commercial tier. That commercial tier is a carded tier, but we also have commercial options such as larger waste containers for businesses. We have been able to attract commercial and business customers to utilize our services, including the multifamily residential. So Lawson Place is a good example. When we acquired that building, we changed out the contract and put in recycling bins and our own commercial service at Lawson Place. And there are other downtown businesses that utilize our services. So that's on the commercial and residential trash pickup. Part of what we also have in this service agreement is Rumpke picks up our downtown waste bins. So they maintain the trash and recycling in the downtown. We also get municipal services from them, which is that they pick up waste from this building, the train station, the all of our other facilities, including our public works yard that's wood and metal. That aspect of the arrangement works differently because we are able to get credits for metal that they pick up from us. If there's enough of it, we'll get a check back. Oftentimes we don't, but we can get a check back on material that they recycle for us. So those are the services. We continue to provide the service that is the yard waste pickup and the bulk item pickup. That's also a line in the bid. Those are services that our residents appreciate and continue. What we have done with bulk pickup since I took over in the last renewal period, we were able to negotiate a second bulk item pickup at no additional cost. That's included in the alternate option that's in the bid package, which is what I'm recommending the option we move forward with. So our residents get a very good rate, what I consider a good rate given the market conditions, and they get those 2 bulk pickup items.
Any comments from council?
Yeah, I think this is as good a deal as we're going to get. It's not like there are lots of contractors beating down our door offering any better deal. I think the 5-year contract makes sense. And I know that in J, customer education awareness, there are a number of things that they're agreeing to do, including on a quarterly basis, I think, notifying if there are any changes in their, put an advertisement in the paper regarding recycling. So I think that we can build on this, as Josue said, as a separate item, but I support this.
Excellent. Any further comments? All right, Brian, do you have anything?
Yeah, I did want to say, Mary Ann, if EC or you are going to kind of take the lead on that education. As I look through all the documents, there's a lot of what you can recycle, but I think it would be helpful to talk about like no-nos. Maybe it's like little cat food things that shouldn't be recycled. I don't know what it is, but I think it'd be interesting to flesh out some of that stuff because I think we see the same things all the time. My main question though, Josue, is it still true that apartment buildings and many of our office buildings are not required to recycle?
I think the challenge, we have an ordinance that allows us the enforcement activity to require commercial spaces and multifamily spaces to recycle. We have not done all the best that we can do with the enforcement. We reached out to the providers, Rumpke and Waste Management. There's another private hauler in town as well. And the pushback we got from them is that they were gonna raise the rates on those property owners to do recycling. Internally, we discussed a potential strategy of becoming the provider for those spaces. And if they switch their accounts over to village solid waste accounts, then it would be included in the rate that we've negotiated with Rumpke. So for this time around, we want to sell that product more to the business customers and not push it as, oh, you have to require and this is what you have to do, but we have negotiated a better arrangement for your solid waste needs and recycling needs. Here's this product that not only is it better for the environment, but it's going to save you money. Because I think that we have negotiated a good rate. Now, I know Mark's got good negotiating skills and others might have negotiated a better rate for themselves. But I think that we offer a great product through our relationship with Rumpke.
Okay, well, so it sounds like you got to my real question, which is that's already part of this contract. That's great, and I mean, I think ultimately we need to move more towards enforcement, because having been in office buildings that don't recycle, and I see that with a lot of people that rent that would like to have the option to recycle. I'm glad you're thinking about that. So sounds good.
It's frustrating. I would add one more, Brian. We a while back, I met with Kirk and others in the downtown business areas, and we're looking at opportunities on how we could consolidate all the different trash bins that are at Keith Alley. So there are business opportunities where we could help businesses save money while also creating a better atmosphere with the limited space that we have. I don't know if you've driven through Keith Alley. Everyone's got their own trash. You know, there's ways that maybe we could work with those. It's a great project. We just haven't had somebody really, you know, the business that says, yeah, let's do this. Let's consolidate all these waste bins and have a designated site. But there are opportunities there. That's
an opportunity for a survey. We'll survey the businesses and say, hey, how full is your dumpster getting before it's emptied? And, you know, if it's not completely full, maybe we should join in. Any takers? You don't have to tell us.
Just a 365 survey?
Yeah, a 360. 360-degree survey, yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry. Okay, if that's all the comments, Judy, if you could do a roll call for the vote?
McQueen.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
DeBoer Leonard.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and I do apologize to everyone for printing off an older version of the agenda.
It's online.
Yeah, I mean, I was using the online because I got to jump around with the hyperlinks, but.
Set a question number, so.
Yep, good enough. We'll do better next time. All right, now moving on to citizen concerns. This is where the public will be allowed 3 minutes to come up and speak to any topic that concerns them that has not already been addressed or is not otherwise on the agenda. Do we have any citizen concerns? Okay, Mitzi, come on up. Please do identify yourself and your affiliation with the village.
My name is Mitzi Miller, and I'm a resident of Yellow Springs. I am a member of the Yellow Springs Citizens Action Group for sidewalks, and I've got some exciting news I wanted to share tonight with you. On September 12th of this year, we went out and surveyed all the properties in Yellow Springs, and we came up with 168 approximately residents that we felt were out of compliance with the ordinance. We again surveyed, and that was sent to the zoning department and our village manager. October 15th, which was last weekend. We were out again surveying. And we found that 80 of those individuals were now in compliance, which I think is almost half, which is great. We've made great gains on East Enon Road. We've been busy removing grass in between the sidewalk pieces. East Limestone is pretty much cleared now. Thistle Creek is been cleared. Antioch College has done an excellent job as well. And we've seen improvements also on the south end of town. Of the 88 now out of compliance, we feel 23 of those are on West South College, and we'll be working with the zoning department on that. And we actually have been going out and assisting individuals if needed. A funny story happened today where I had on the 12th assisted an elderly woman in her home and cleared her sidewalks for her, and realized that she had a pine tree that was impacting safe travel on, and I brought it up to her attention, and she said, let me just go out and look at that and decide, but please come back. And I came back today, and her comment to me was, I don't want you to go ahead and cut those branches for me. I appreciate what you've done, but I'll wait till the village sends me some kind of notice to cut them down. So the letters that the zoning department have sent out have been, I feel, successful in reaching and getting people to comply. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mitzi. Anyone else for public comments for, again, items that are not on the agenda?
This for my own edification.
Please, Gyamfi, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
Gyamfi, human citizen, planet Earth.
Your relationship to the village?
Citizen.
Thank you.
But like I said, this is for my own edification. And Philip tried to, he explained some of this to me, but if you could just direct me toward the policy so it's clear to me. But it's my understanding if you're a 501c3 non-religious organization, you can't rent out public facilities, Bryan Center, for religious service. Would that be correct?
Well, I think the 501c3 status is different from what the uses of the building are. During my time here, I don't believe that we've had a religious service, but I understand that there were conversations about what activities were allowable or not allowable in the John Bryan Center. We haven't had an issue with any activity being a prohibited activity since my time here. I don't know if prior to me, Judy, if there were any incidents with a particular organization or type of activity.
Well, if there's any policy, I just want to get the clarity because, just for the unconstitutionality of it. Now I do know that if you are a religious organization, you can rent out the facility and have religious services. But Philip was telling me, yeah, no one can rent out the Bryan Center or any public space if you're not for profit or 501c3 that's non-religious filed. If you are that entity, you can't have religious services, is what he was explaining to me. But if you are a religious organization, of course you can rent it out and have religious service. So if no, okay.
No. There's no 501c3 caveat with regard to religious services. I think there's something way back in an ancient deed that says you can't hold religious services in the Bryan Center, but it has nothing to do with 501c3 status. It's just also you can't drink alcohol and you can't. So it's from a deed or a restriction on the Bryan Center usage from a long, long time ago. But yeah, it doesn't make any distinction between type of religious service or who's performing it or anything like that.
Well, I would think, I would hope it's because it'd be unconstitutional, number one, but is there, so where would I find there's clarity on it? That's probably my.
Well, there's sort of two issues. One is I mean, I can go digging around and find that original deed, but the second part would be to have, if Josue wants to follow up, he can check with Samantha Stewart about what actually is told to people when they go to rent the space, because those may be two different things depending on what the policy is, and I'm not familiar with the policy. I know that Samantha would be, so.
Gyamfi, what are you trying to have a religious service here, or what's the issue?
Yeah, Gyamfi's trying to have a religious service. No, I'm making sure that these things aren't exploited and taken advantage of in the name of the Constitution, that there aren't organizations renting and having, that's where I'm coming in on this.
Okay.
That nobody's exploiting that. Mm-hmm. And nobody in the village is allowing that to be exploited.
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of that's going on.
No, I don't know if it's going on either. I just want to know ahead of time, thinking ahead. Mm-hmm. So if I could just, you said Samantha, is there someone I could come in to Bryan Center and get the policy? Because if somebody comes in, that's who they go see, Samantha?
Yes, that's all room rentals go through Samantha.
And I asked her what the policy is.
Yeah, we just
do you want to,
whether we had an issue. I'll take down your concern and I'll have somebody follow up.
And that was it.
All right, thank you. Mark, I know you were agreeing and not agreeing.
Yeah, just because I have a wife who does what she does for a living. Judy, I know that Robin has information on that, and it does, you're absolutely right. It goes back to the original deed record, and it actually goes to, it also speaks to a feud between Brian and Birch that happened many years ago. But my understanding was, you're correct, that there was a deed restriction put on any land donated by Brian, that no religious services take place on the property.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks for that input.
Just to make sure there is no church service happening at the John Bryan Center.
So you all is well. All is well. All right, any other citizen concerns? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move on to special reports unless there's something else happening to my left I need to be concerned about.
Just giving them a little nudge about the special report that's coming up.
All righty. So first on the agenda for special reports is the Active Transportation Advisory Committee regarding a sidewalk report.
No, it's the whole.
Yep.
Already, probably this bad agenda again. All right.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Chris Bongiorno. I'm here representing the Yellow Springs Active Transportation Advisory Committee, and I believe there's going to be a presentation on screen.
If you hit play, you'll switch it over there, and I'll just hit screen share.
There we go.
There you go.
All right.
Judy, make sure that I had that fancy tool for you.
Thank you. So I need to hit it again?
No, I'm just going to share it so that.
Okay.
There you go.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Chris Bongiorno. I'm a Village of Yellow Springs resident, and I'm the chair of the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. And tonight we're going to give you a little introduction to the committee, a little bit on our background, some of our goals and priorities for this year and going forward. And I also wanted to give an opportunity to the other folks in the room, most of whom are also members of the committee, to say hello, and we'll have a chance to hear from everybody before we're done this evening. I mentioned that I'm the chair of the committee. Marianne is our council liaison. We also have Brian Housh, council president, is on the committee, and village manager Josue Salmeron are on the committee. We are as many committees in the village, we wear many hats, our members do, and we come from a variety of backgrounds with a variety of areas of expertise that I think benefits our purpose. And I just also wanted to note that we are a relatively young committee and one that doesn't see a reason to be closed. So if there are ideas or you come across a citizen who would add value to our committee, we'd be happy to hear from you. Recommendations are welcome. So a little bit on our background. There was a previous version of this committee that was established in 2014 as an informal citizen committee. We supported a number of efforts throughout the village to improve mobility and accessibility over the years following 2014, ultimately leading up to an effort to update the school travel plan, which is supported by the village of Yellow Springs, as well as the schools. That was in 2018, and we took a very active role in both sourcing the funds for and finding a consultant for the 2018-2019 Active Transportation Plan. That led to several of the improvements that you've seen in the last couple of years. And then earlier this year, in March 2022, we were established as a Village Advisory Committee, and that's where we are today. Do I need to hit a different button this time? There we go. Oh, all right. So just a little bit more on some of the things we worked on over the past several years before we became an official advisory committee. The Active Transportation Plan and the School Travel Plan, those are the ATP and STP acronyms there. We were really a core part of the engagement effort that went out to the community. School events like that on the bottom right of your screen. We met here in the John Bryan Center to engage the community on several concepts that were part of the Active Transportation Plan. We did walk audits with members of the community as well as some of the public agencies that support transportation projects in the region. And these produced two plans that have been used as references and guides over the past couple of years, the Active Transportation Plan in your top left, and this is a map from the School Travel Plan on the right. We also worked on things like adding additional bike parking capacity downtown. This was a bike corral that was added in street on Xenia Avenue. It was only up for about a year. We supported things like bike and walk to school day throughout the community that were very successful. And then some things that are really hitting the ground right now. We went together with the village to support an application to ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, for Safe Routes to Schools funding for a capital project to add sidewalks on Limestone Street. This is a top priority of both the School Travel Plan and the Active Transportation Plan. And as you've seen, starting this summer and finishing this fall, those sidewalks were added to Limestone Street. So thank you for all your support in getting that done. The rectangular rapid flashing beacons, that's the fancy name for this blinking signs at Short Street and Xenia Avenue. Those were also added, and that came after a recommendation from the Active Transportation Plan. All this is great. We're making progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done to ensure safety, accessibility, and mobility for people of all ages and abilities in the village. We're familiar with all of these situations as people who live and walk and bike and drive here every day. There are sidewalks that just end. There are sidewalks that are overgrown with grass. I know Mitzi, through some of your hard work recently, you've started to make some progress on some of these issues. When we do have snow and it piles up, it ends up blocking the sidewalks and those nice curb ramps that we put in recent years. So people with strollers or in wheelchairs have to move around those snowplow mounds to get where they're going. We have situations like that in the top right of your screen where people cross where they want to cross, and maybe there's some things we can do as a community to make those crossings safer. And then in the bottom right is an image of somebody loading their bicycle onto the green cats in the middle of Xenia Avenue. Are there ways we can improve those sort of access points for people that use transit in our community? So a little bit more about our committee and where we're focusing. Our purpose really is to be a resource for the village to promote active transportation with a focus on safety and accessibility. Really, that's something that we talked about very early on this year. Those are the top two priorities for this group, safety and accessibility. So we want to be a resource and a source of expertise for the village staff and council, and we want to be a conduit between the community and village government. We also talked about what our priorities would be in the very near term. What are we talking about this year? And there's only so much you can accomplish in the first year as an advisory committee, but we wanted to focus first and foremost on sidewalk safety and accessibility. And that voice came largely from Mitzi and Barbara Mann, who's also on our committee, and the committee as a whole really supported that idea. So we wanted to focus on that first and foremost. And second, we wanted to work on safety enhancements that could be done in the short term at key intersections and along significant roadway segments where dangerous conditions exist. Some of those are very clear to everyday travelers to the high school, for example, at the intersection of East Enon and West South College. It's kind of, I said at one point, it's an organized chaos, but it's kind of disorganized chaos, and especially at dismissal in the afternoons, where it's a free-for-all for about 15 minutes. And we spent some time out there as a committee and thought this is just something bad is waiting to happen here. So we want to start to take off some things that we can do in the near term and provide some recommendations to council and the administration. And then more of a supporting role for this committee. We know that there are a number of active planning and construction projects that will continue to come up from time to time, whether that be the school travel plan update that we're looking to support in the next year, or any capital projects that the village looks to move forward. We want to be able to support those in any way we can. And then lastly, I think we can all agree that there's a lack of bike parking capacity, in particular in downtown. And this is not the top priority of this group. There are other organizations that maybe can lead on that, but we want to support that. And then looking a little further out, pardon me, 2023 and beyond, I think the most important part when it comes to village priority setting and policy making, we want to help advise on a sustainable path forward, no pun intended, for sidewalk accessibility and maintenance. So I'm not sure what the dollars are in your budget today or what they are for next year, but it's something that maybe we can help to advise on where we can get as a community with certain means that we may have. And maybe there's policy changes that have happened over the years. I know in 2015 was maybe the last time we took a real serious look at our local policy on sidewalks and local conditions. So we can help to support that. I mentioned the school travel plan. The last one was completed in 2018. We are due for an update next year. Every 5 years, ODOT asks for an update. So we're going to support that. And the village council and village manager's office have a role to play in that as well. We're going to continue to look for ways that we can implement our safe routes plans, in particular around the high school, middle school, and Mills Lawn campuses. We know that Dayton Street multi-purpose path is scheduled for an update next year, so we want to advise the village on how best to proceed with that. And at the same time, Dayton Street has been raised as a priority segment in particular between Wright Street and Winter Street, where intersection visibility and crossing visibility is challenging. And maybe there's some quick wins we can get through there, as well as the speed on Dayton Street. And then again, mentioning bike parking, I'll give Gary the floor if he wants to use it to talk about some of his ideas for bike parking. I know we talked about special events, but also just day-to-day bike parking downtown being a deficiency. So with that, I'm going to cede the floor to any of my colleagues on the committee, or just open it up to questions from council.
Well, thank you for I'll start. I noticed that you said that one bike ramp was there for a year. The rack, I say
yes,
ramp, but
corral,
rack.
yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, corral. So thank you. I want to use the proper terminology. So why was that just there for a year? I mean, I've parked my bike there once, and I think it's still crossed out as it's not a parking space, so it's not being used.
It is a yellow curb, so it is not a sanctioned parking space, but as we all see every day, it's used by delivery vehicles or just regular citizens parking. We looked at that as an opportunity. This was under Patty Bates's administration, as an opportunity to both use that space for a better purpose, but also increase the capacity for parking. We started it in front of the US Bank on Short Street. I think it was the first space, and then there was the accessible space right behind it. using a village rack, and then we purchased the corral equipment, which includes the 2-wheel stops, the raised delineators that mark the space with reflections on them so that people see them even at night, and then the actual rack itself, which was bolted into the pavement. So we did a lot of measuring. We looked at precedent from around the state of Ohio, in particular on state routes, and felt that it was a safe location for it, we being the Active Transportation Committee at the time. And once it was installed, we observed how it performed. This was before the rapid flashing beacons were there, and there was a signpost in the crosswalk, if you recall, that said yield to pedestrians.
Right.
So what we would hear from folks, in particular trucks, is that they would have to decide, they should slow down. They should be going like 10 miles per hour or less as they pass through downtown. That's my view. They would often have to decide whether they nudge that crosswalk delineator or perhaps clip those delineators. Okay. I never saw that actually happen. We were hearing this as a safety concern. We also had heard from people, I'm not sure if they were users of the racks or just other citizens, saying it's not safe to have people parking their bike in the street and then they're in the street. My counter to that is if you're parking your car in one of those curb spaces, you're also getting out into the middle of the street. So I think it was workable. Ultimately, it was removed for, I don't remember if it was for a street fair or if it was for winter plowing season. We were under the, we understood that it would be removed before snowfall. But our hope was that it would be reinstalled in the spring. And I don't know, we may still own the equipment, but it has not been revisited as far as I know.
Well, John and I discussed it, and there was a suit against us, somebody getting injured and having an insurance claim. So there's a liability issue, and I see, Johnny, if you want to weigh, there were two. So there's an insurance risk and liability issue with it being in Xenia Avenue. However, if you recall, we had this, what I thought elements of a project that work well. And I remember it so well because I think it's when my honeymoon here ended, when we did the one-way concept on Walnut Street. We piloted the bicycle parking on Short Street. And I think that Short Street is worth revisiting for bicycle parking or around that Short Street corridor or street.
I would agree there's some merits for that. I think people will feel more comfortable parking.
Right. It's not as busy street. There's no semis running next to you. So I think that's a more suitable area to consider. But as a committee member, if I may, I would like to take a step back, and I want to thank you for your presentation, Chris, and I also want to thank Johnny and all the others that have been involved in getting us to where we are today. Not just on grinding sidewalks, repairing sidewalks, but putting on the ramps. There's so much that we've done to make walkability in the village so much more easier, attainable, and all those things. I also want to thank the committee because we wouldn't have been able to secure that $1.2 million grant if we didn't have the ATP plan and have such a well put together plan. So I think those are fundamental to our success in the future. And the school travel plan, we need to update that next year because if we want to go for some Safe Routes to School money, we need to have an updated plan, and whatever we're pursuing needs to be part of that plan. So all those things go,
Half hour.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. So I just want to thank you all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great committee, and we'll keep doing things, but we are a half hour beyond schedule.
I'd like to say something. Thank you. So I have a couple questions. Thank you for your presentation. Let's see here. Has there been any like talk or mention about possibly that little kind of breezeway area by the Yellow Springs News or anything in the Keeks Alley? I know there used to be bike racks at Tom's. I don't know if they're still there. But is like, especially the news. I mean, I know that a lot of people who actually work at the news ride their bikes and then they park in the back or in the news. Yeah. Is there?
I know there's a rack on Keeks Alley.
Right.
There's a rack behind Tom's. They moved it to the back.
Okay.
It's private.
Oh, that's where it is.
It's a private rack.
All right.
But I think what we can do is, and we've done this in the past, create a map of opportunities for downtown bike parking and
the
just
other
move forward
piece,
from there.
really quickly, is so crossing guards crossing guards at Mills Lawn, is that a thing anymore?
Yes, there's a new crop of student crossing guards that have adult supervision in the morning and the afternoon, yes.
All right, any adult crossing guards, any volunteer adult crossing guards who go out with the students?
So last school year, there were adult crossing guards only.
Okay.
So there was a volunteer crew. I was one of them.
Okay.
This school year, it is now student crossing guards who have adult supervision. There's a supervisor who's out in the mornings, but that's the best I can tell you.
No, that's fine. I haven't been that way, and since my kids are.
It's great. I love seeing them out there.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Chris. And in the interest of time, unless there's some burning question or comment, anyone wants to make, we're gonna.
Johnny's got his hand.
Oh, Johnny. Yes, Mr.
I think one thing that needs to be said, Housh, is the insurance company is the one that told us to remove it immediately, that they would not pay for any claims when people got hurt on that bike racket in the middle of 68.
That's certainly motivation enough. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
All righty. If I'm looking at this agenda right, it's time for the manager's report. And Josue, I will trust your judgment in how much you share.
Okay, well, I've got my managers and the report in there. I think what I'll highlight is perhaps the things that are in the works starting this week. We're moving to get some of the projects going, and that includes the storm reroute project that's going to kick off November 1st. So if you recall, we moved that project after the street fair, so we didn't break up John Bryan Center while all these other things were going on. So that's, we're gearing up for that project. I forgot to mention my announcement that the tower is down. So the Antioch Power Plant tower, so they've been hard at work on that. We'll clean up some bricks and bring you guys a memento or a paperweight for whatever you want to use it, highlighting our contribution of it. So we've got that project. We'll start working on the sewer reroute project. One of the things that you voted on tonight for that supplemental is for us to move that sewer relining project ahead. So we're gonna be spending a lot of time getting that project off the ground. We also got about $75,000 worth of sidewalk repairs that we're going to do. If you recall, that was part of the approval for the 2022 budget. So we're gonna start working that in the coming week. So then there's a lot of reports, a lot of stuff in my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from council?
I have a really simple question about the buzzards.
Yes.
So I just found this fascinating. So there's nothing you can do about the buzzards?
There are ways that you can disrupt the areas that they're congregating their devices, but there are migratory birds and they're protected by law. So that we can refer property owners to devices or the ODNR or other websites that have recommendations on how to deal with a gathering of these birds. So, and I understand that we have both type of birds, turkey vultures and buzzards, and not to be confused as one and the same. They're two different types of.
Turkey buzzards.
Gary, you want to step up? If this is a pertinent comment.
Okay, Gary is going to provide clarification.
No, it's no, the buzzards and the turkey vultures are the same thing. What's new due to the climate shifting are black vultures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've never been around until recent years. They have a black head versus a red head, you know, and they've become common.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. There's a joke in there somewhere.
Well, I guess I'll just say, the resident who came in and talked, I know the vultures or the buzzards or both have been near my house before, and I'm like, please God, no. So I feel really bad we can't do anything about this.
Not a bird guy?
I mean, there's being a bird guy, and then there's having these massive birds around. It's, I find them to be menacing personally. Anyway, I just feel bad. There's nothing. So you're saying there's nothing that we can do, basically?
We can refer them to.
I mean, because it sounded like he was using like every.
You know, and I feel terrible because he's probably spending a lot of research figuring out ways to resolve this. We're
we're limited on what we can
Yeah,
do.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make it clear that I think it's not for lack of wanting to.
Right,
It's like,
right.
so maybe, I don't know who decides what migratory birds are allowed to do, but anyway, just for that person. Okay.
Mother Nature.
Yeah, I think as powerful that may be beyond my scope.
All right, Josue, you still have the floor.
Oh, well, any other questions?
Okay, all right, moving on. Oh, we good? All right, old business. And yes, we are a bit behind. So we've got the Finance Committee ongoing conversation addressing inflation, taxation, and affordability, and including the vendor registration proposal. That's Brian?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to let Gavin and Josue speak to this, but this doesn't need to be a long conversation. We've already mentioned that we had a meeting with Rita, and really this is gauging interest with council to move forward on what it would require to get the profit tax from vendors that are here regularly. So Gavin, Josue, I'll let you share anything you think relevant.
Gavin, if I may, I can start with what the issue is. What's the problem? So when we've been looking at where are areas of revenue opportunity that we're just not able to gauge or capture. And so one of them is the vendors that set up in the village. So there's vendors that are selling all kinds of things on public and private property. And we don't know where they're filing their returns, and we can't ask where they're filing the returns because we don't have anything on them. We don't have a registration, and we don't have an investigative purpose to ask Rita, who's our tax agency, to let us know, is this person paying taxes in the village? So we know that we have vendors that are here every weekend or several days during the week. Mm-hmm. And those, by the timing requirement, they would be required to remit sales taxes for the county and income taxes for Yellow Springs. Well, right now we can't ask Rita to investigate whether those individuals are filing taxes because we are not requiring them to register with the village. Mm-hmm. So the change that needs to be, the problem in our ordinance is on the license permitting, where the exemption. So here's the license required and the exemption. And every solicitor of funds or internet vendor of any magazines, medicine, goods, services, wares of any value show before exposing, offering, same upon the streets or sidewalks of the village within the village, procure a license to provide in section 02. But there's this section, it should not apply to any representative of religious, patriotic, charitable, or civic organization, nor shall a license be required of owners of any product of his or her own raising or manufacture of any article manufactured by him or her to vend or sell such articles or products. So this exemption, we've considered that all these vendors are selling some product that they're making, whether it's a rock that they're putting around a necklace or a t-shirt that they're printing and whatnot. And so we just haven't required registration of all these folks. So a way to resolve this issue is to remove the exemption. And if you want to provide relief to vendors who might need that relief, then you address it through the licensing fee, creating a mechanism where you provide either a reduced fee or no fee, but still require the permitting process so that we would have the investigative authority to ask Rita to see if those folks are paying income taxes in the village. So that's the short version on the issue and a proposed solution. Mm-hmm. Gavin, did I miss anything?
Well, I'll just add that the other thing is this gives Rita the opportunity to share information with those vendors about what their tax obligations are.
Correct.
Yep.
I know they came and talked to us, but I don't have any dog in this fight. I mean, I think I'm just trying to figure out how do we if there are people who are making notable money from vending, then I guess we should try to figure that out. But it hasn't seemed to me like that's a significant issue. But I can understand trying to figure out how to have some kind of system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the issues. I don't know, Brian, you want to go into any of the other opportunities we've had, reciprocal tax or any other things that we discussed in the committee?
I think we rest on this one. We've got other issues to bring forward from that RETA meeting. But I guess I will say I'm supportive of moving forward with reviewing this and enforcing. And I think, for folks that don't make a lot of money, they won't have tax obligations anyway. So we're not hurting anyone. But, for the folks that are selling tie-dyes every weekend, they're probably making a significant amount of money. And I think everybody should pay taxes if they're supposed to. So.
Well, good. Yeah, I think I like the principle. That caveat, that exemption does present a problem of sorts, and I think removing it unshackles the administration, but it also still allows for its intended purpose, which is to give special consideration to certain groups. It can still be there. So yeah, I like the way this looks. Any other comments from council on this particular special report?
So,
okay,
I do have a quick question. So, state of Ohio, you registered business, you register with the state, you have a vendor's license. And how would this legislation help with that? Because there are people who are obviously vending who don't have a vendor's license with the state. It's not an actual business. So how does that work with this piece?
If someone that's vending but's not registered with the state, then RETA, one of the pieces that by changing legislations, that RETA will provide educational materials on how to sign up for paying municipal taxes, whether they are typically for a vendor will be net profit taxes.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So they would help them creating those accounts with RETA and other states to ensure that they're doing their tax filings as they should be.
Okay.
Mark, was your hand up? Okay, come on up, please.
In regards to the taxation, it's not only RETA, the vendor's licenses, there's actually two different types of vendor's licenses. There's a standard vendor's license, which allows you to vend in one place. There's a transient vendor's license, and we get a lot of vendors, street vendors that are coming in from Clark County that do not have a transient vendor's license, I would guess. And so when I go out to do other things like for the Buckeye Trail Association and open up the trail shop in another county for a weekend, I have to pay the sales tax in that county.
Right.
And so that's another place that we're missing out on funding for Greene County.
And we do care about Greene County funding. We really do. I don't know why I'm looking at this agenda. Okay, so I think we're good.
Okay.
If you guys are done with your special
So we'll
report.
draft up a proposal and bring it back to council when it's convenient.
Okay. Well, thank you all for that. All right, Brian, we've got the goals revised template. Do you want to spend a few minutes on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Looks like I'm able to do that. Okay, so you guys are seeing this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what was in the packet was really trying to just carry over, I think, what we've talked about, what I've heard is continued priorities. But Marianne and I had a good discussion, and I do want to move towards something, and I don't know what's the best way to put it together, that really kind of visualizes where the priorities are. And ultimately what we need to be thinking about is two things. One is action plans for getting these things done, and then who's responsible and how we're tracking those. But the concept of this diagram, and everyone will have more of a chance to look at it because I really drafted it up over the weekend, is to kind of think about it as like a hierarchy of goals. And I think we've all recognized the importance of looking at infrastructure. And this is where, in terms of our 2 budget sessions coming up, we're going to really dig into and focus on what fixed infrastructure means, and what price tags are around that, what kinds of things we can accomplish, what the timelines look like. What we've heard from Johnny and the team is that fixing infrastructure is going to be critical, particularly to some of our housing goals, which I think is a big priority. And certainly it ties into affordability. And then I've kind of put on the top of the hierarchy some of the other important goals for all of us. But I think ultimately, I want to have some kind of guideline in focusing us in those discussions moving forward. I do think there's still room for the goal sheet that's in the packet in terms of thinking about responsibilities and action items. And also, Josue shared with me an outward-facing document from a nearby municipality, which I think is an important thing for us to put together as well, so that we're better communicating to the public what our goals are, why we're focused on those, and how we're going to get there. So this is certainly an iterative process, but this is what I wanted to share for today. And I think an important step in the next week is for other council members to contribute things to either of the two documents that we have, or maybe we end up with structuring something else, so that all those things are captured when we have those budget discussions, because I do think we're going to have to make some hard decisions about what we actually have the ability to fund with our budget. So I will stop there, and if there's other feedback today, but I do think that, as we've done in the past, we can individually contribute to Judy and build out these documents for future sessions.
Brian, I do like this new portal a way of looking at things. And you mentioned the outward-facing document, that a sample of a document that Josue shared with you. And in last meeting, Marianne gave us samples of an annual report from another municipality. Would that type of annual presentation be the place for this, or are we thinking about something separate and maybe more iterative with respect to the public information?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, because that annual report from the jurisdiction in Maine has been really interesting to look at. I think we start with setting some parameters around what we should be reporting out on. And so I think we sort of build towards that. And then we do something that's more expansive next year, annual report wise.
Okay. All right, good. Any other comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
So just this will be sent around, and then the thing that you mentioned, we don't have these yet, right?
This I'm not sure you have yet.
I've not seen it.
And then the other document, I'll make sure Judy sends you guys a Word version, and the one that's in the packet. Yeah.
And I'll send out the document I sent out to Brian.
Okay, so I think I heard you asking for feedback or input, Brian. So just so I can make sure I understand how to give input. So are you saying that, like, in this thing, in this document, that you mentioned something about a hierarchy? Are you suggesting that, so for instance, like, let's just say that I thought that something that was lower on the document should be a higher priority, that I should give that feedback, and or if I thought there was something that wasn't on the document, that I should give that feedback? Can you just share more about what you were hoping for in terms of feedback?
Yeah, I think those two things are important. One is priority. I think we need to come to agreement as a council about what those are. And, just to be clear, in this document, fixing infrastructure is the priority. The idea that everything builds off of that. And then the second thing is, if anything's missing, particularly in the document that's in the packet, that is where, I think ultimately we're going to hold all the priorities and aspirations and whatnot. And so we want to make sure that any of those are flagged. I pulled several things off from 2022. And the one in the packet should have been labeled 2023 draft. But that's kind of the next step in sort of what I think everyone's talking about. But if something's missing, send it to Judy, and then we'll get it incorporated in the next iteration.
Gavin, I have a thought on the question that you proposed. I didn't see the hierarchy as what things rank in terms of priorities. I think that particularly in the area of infrastructure, I see it as a building block that addressing some of the infrastructure needs would be prerequisites to addressing some of the other issues. So for example, affordability. In us ensuring that we have a robust infrastructure system, we can manage cost, and that cost management effort ties into the affordability. So one of the things that I've been grappling with in the last 2 weeks is that we met with our Courtney and Associates consultants about the business model for the 3 enterprises, that being water, electric, and sewers. And there aren't great news there. And being able to manage the productivity and efficiencies of those enterprises are essential to being able to control or manage the cost for residents. So some of these things are enabling those. If we have robust infrastructure, then it enables us to build more houses. It enables us to add on more customers. So I saw it in this particular thing, that in the hierarchy that Brian proposed, Maslow's hierarchy of needs popped into my head because I'm familiar with the model, but there are enabling activities. So I see that some are enabling activities for other things.
So, sorry. So I'm just making sure I have the right documents to look at. So this one, I know this one is going to get sent. The only other one I saw in the packet says draft 2022 Yellow Springs Village Strategic Goals. Is there a 2023 one that I missed?
That's what I just said. That should say 2023. So that there is a error in the header.
So this is a different one than what we've seen earlier. That was 2022.
Yeah, so Brian is saying that this is correct except for the year. That should say 2023. And Brian, I'm showing the document that's in the packet, page 118.
Yep.
And I guess, I think, because I looked at it quickly, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking at. Basically, it seems like the only conversation we've had about goals was the conversation we had on Zoom in earlier, or it was the end of September, right? Anyway, there's a bunch of the stuff that's on here that seems like it's new, that is either new or is a carryover, but that wasn't referenced. So I guess if I understand you correctly, this is essentially a working draft that you want feedback on, that's not meant to be assumed to be a representative of what that conversation was, or what is the direction that you're seeking to go in, Brian or Marianne or anyone else who worked on this. It's basically a really rough draft. Is that right?
I would say that yes. And Judy, was it not, and help me with this, the meeting that was canceled from last week, was that going to be a goals?
It was not. That was supposed to be your first budget session.
Okay, all right.
But budget and goals are fairly intertwined, so
Right.
that's.
Right. So Gavin, the point I was making is there would have been another opportunity for us to speak about our goals with respect to their relationship to budget, which is a thing that we want to do. Instead of just having a bunch of lofty goals, we want to check the price tag before we stick it on the wall. All right, Brian, do you have anything else?
Not at this point.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're down to,
Sorry,
I'm
just
sorry,
real
I'm
quick.
sorry.
So send this feedback to Brian, is that?
Well, he said to Judy.
To Judy, sorry, okay. Okay, so you're gonna send us a Word document, then we can make track changes and send them to you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, sorry, I just want to be clear.
Yeah, and actually, this is essentially the process we followed in the past, is kind of gathering different thoughts, trying to put them on a document, but then, yeah, sort of, as you said, track changing it and, each individual council member working through it. So, yep.
And we thought about putting this kind of things on SharePoint where multiple people can work on a document at one time, but it violates sunshine law because it could be a form of communication working on one document at once.
Even if it's public?
It's not.
Yeah.
We have accounts.
Could we just, so we couldn't just use a Google Doc?
But you're also not finalizing your 2023 goals. I mean, really, I would say this is an exercise to properly prepare you for the budget sessions. When you do 2023 goals is January usually, but what you recognize as a council is, boy, we really need to let this inform budget. So I would not worry about getting this, in a final, pretty ready for a resolution fashion. This is really about making sure that everyone's had their input as to what the priorities are. I think that's first and foremost. Is that correct, Brian?
Yep.
Okay. Are all hearts and minds clear on this issue?
So just to be clear, we're not allowed to use a Google Doc. Because even if the public has access to it, but say we're all commenters, I would love to know what my fellow members actually think about the priorities, because
That's why you have public meetings, because everybody else wants to know what your priorities are as well.
Okay.
All right. Now, volunteer program update. Ms. Brown.
Okay, so just thinking about what would happen, Brian included, a document that has objectives and precedents, what we kind of want to talk about or see happening with a volunteer program. So the objective is to continue being a healthy, thriving community. It's important, if we're to do that, to engage our residents and provide venues for them to utilize their skills to improve quality of life for all villagers. While encouraging and facilitating citizen volunteerism, it has clear benefits, particularly for small community. We recognize that managing volunteers requires intentional and clear policies, and this initiative is doable and aligned with our village values. And I agree with that statement that Brian wrote 100%. So what the village already has a loose volunteer. I don't want to say loose volunteer. There's some very committed volunteers that volunteer with different committees. There's Glen Helen, Tecumseh Land Trust volunteers, Yellow Springs Schools, obviously, Yellow Springs Community Foundation, and now active transportation and what the sidewalk folks are doing. So we already have a history of volunteerism in the community. Kind of one of the things that I'm thinking about is what it would take, given kind of other models of municipalities, like there's one in Delaware comes to mind, for example, also Centerville, having one place where people could go to find out what volunteer opportunities were available, a calendar of events, volunteer meetings, and that kind of thing. And I understand it's gonna be a pretty big effort, but we have other communities and other examples to follow. Let's see what else. So the parameters, this is from Brian too. Certainly protocols need to be in place to ensure volunteer safety, and there's a need to further explore opportunities for training individuals to be involved in critical services that could benefit the village and community. And so I would say that we have people that are available to volunteer in almost every capacity in this community. We are extremely fortunate in that way. So we want to point, it says our goal is at this point is to point the program in a place that allows for established and consistency and liability. We also recognize that managing volunteers requires additional work for village team members, and we want to ensure input from staff so that there is a benefit for the community. And so I know that a lot of municipalities that are our size have Miller Fellows, they have volunteer coordinators, people who have experience, who are retired with volunteerism and managing groups of people. So that's another piece we need to think about. The other thing I think that Brian, you brought up was kind of exploring the piece with workers' comp and what that would involve with solicitor. Because I know that in order to have, kids who are maybe in juvenile detention who want to volunteer in town instead of going to Xenia, there's a piece there that I think might require more input from workers' comp and solicitor. That's kind of a question.
Is that it's probably an Amy question?
I think it's an Amy question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll table that until Amy can.
But I mean, but on that piece specifically. So I would like to see Brian and I have the opportunity to get together and look at some other examples of volunteer practice and policies in, municipalities that are our size. Centerville, they're not, they're not our size, but they have a pretty robust volunteer program, to see what it looks like, do some exploring about what their website stuff looks like, how you sign up, what the waiver looks like in the future.
So my question, I thought where this was headed was that the proposal would come forth for council. Well, yes, we'd like to empower the solicitor to take the additional time off retainer needed to research this, because that's the next step. So is that council's understanding of, yes, you'd like it to go to that next step, because it's, the rest of it is the legal bells and whistles and waivers and
So I guess my point is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're not there yet, because we can do the volunteer thing. It's already happening. But for the piece where we want to have, like I mentioned, I don't know, kids from Greene County juvenile detention come and be able to work in town, or using volunteers that might come from the state, like that piece we need to hash out, I think, with a solicitor.
Oh, yeah.
So there are a couple resources that I think we should take advantage of as we're exploring this. One is the volunteer toolbox that's put out by the National Association of Counties. It's quite extensive. The other is Dublin, Ohio, and Jordan Gray mentioned the woman whose name I took down in contact and I lost it, but I've asked him for it. She's like El Primo volunteer coordinator, knows everything about volunteer program in Dublin. And I think she would be a great resource. And I think as we're gathering information, before we start thinking about getting our attorney involved, as Carmen said.
All right. So we've got more work to do. Is Brian and Carmen, is there anything more than a nod, word of encouragement, pat on the back that you're looking for from us?
I don't know. I think that on the administrative side, can we pursue a Miller Fellow? Can we pursue a municipal volunteer to help direct the volunteer, to coordinate volunteers?
I have questions about the Miller program. I know we've had some history, and I don't know if those applications are year-round or if they just are in the fall, or how that works.
They are year-round, and we have had Miller Fellow volunteers, or not. They're not volunteers. They're actually program participants that get a stipend or get some sort of compensation.
Yeah.
So we've had someone work with our utility RANA program when we launched the program back 3-4 years ago. Most recently, we had secured funding for Miller Fellow to work with the neighborhood gardens. There were some issues on eligibility, so our Miller Fellow became Amani.
and was running the pool, and she got all kinds of training and, worked great for us. So I'm going to be pursuing the Miller Fellow Program for the pool. So, because I see Amani, I see the years that she spent with us and see her growth just in the 3 years that I've been here, but also the many years that she's worked for the village. And it's just, I'm so proud that we can contribute to the development of not just Amani, but so many youth that work at the pool and other services. So we're planning to pursue for the Miller Fellow because it works so well in that area.
Vista, but that would be something that we would have to put together.
That requires a different level of organization. With the Miller Fellow program that we have now, it's a turnkey. We have positions that are eligible for Miller Fellow programming, and they're just turnkey options.
So what I would see as helpful is sort of first, second, third tier proposal. First tier is kind of what we have now. We put an ad in the paper, we hope somebody shows up. There's not a lot of coordination. Second tier is more this starting out of the gate of what you're talking about. We'd like a more comprehensive program. We'd like them to be able to do more things. We'd like to have guidelines in place. We'd like to have a place that can, those kinds of things which would be relatively doable, but we need a good solid proposal so that everyone knows how much time that's going to take and whether it's going to be a lot of staff time, a little staff time. And then kind of a third tier, which is, if we get this second thing going, then do we want to expand it? And then would that require more solicitor input? So I would find that useful to have that come back as a sort of, here's how we'd like this to move forward and how we'd like to start it growing.
And I would, Carmen, I know you were tempted, and I would have used the same word, tempted to say we have a loosely organized volunteer effort. What is, I think, more accurate is there are organizations that, mostly nonprofits, that have needs, and there are folks who have a heart for that organization's mission. So there are volunteers that work in certain spaces, and I would submit if you talk to them, you get a mixed response in terms with regard to whether they would want to do something else. They're volunteers because they like that program, or they just have a bunch of free time, and this is one of the things they do, and they could also be part of this more generic volunteer program. So it's not a suggestion, just a thought, that the folks who are eligible and able to volunteer, if we say that they are doing it now, we know where they are. They're volunteering for these, the precedents that were listed. So anyway, just a thought. I mean, there's a pool of volunteers. They don't know they're part of a pool because they just think they're doing this one thing that they do. The next person's just on this one thing. So, I'm not saying one thing or the other in terms of that's all the volunteer resources that we have in town. But I also, on the other hand, don't think folks are sitting around with a bunch of free time waiting for somebody to call them either. But so I think it's moving forward. It seems to be moving in the right direction. And again, I just think that is a thought, to reach out to folks who are already volunteering in other organizations, because they have the capacity and the wherewithal to do that. And just a matter of convincing them to fall in love with this other thing, whatever the other thing is.
So I think Florence wanted to say something.
Oh.
Yes, I was going to ask if Carmen has contacted Melissa Heston with the Community Foundation. Just last week, she sent an email out that they have a portal for nonprofits, and they're already onboarding for volunteers of all ages, kids, seniors, young adults, teens, family, and businesses here in Yellow Springs already. So I suggest that you contact her, and so we don't have to duplicate work here in the village. I will forward you her email, Carmen.
Oh, I have her email.
Oh, okay.
You have the email that was sent?
I have Melissa's email.
I'm asking, I think, a different question.
I don't have that email. I have Melissa's email.
Okay, well, Florence said she will send it. We'll encourage her to do that.
Well, she already has it. She said she already has it.
I have Melissa's email. I don't have the email you're speaking about, but I have the email. There it is.
So this is
Thank
the
you,
program.
Florence.
This is the program that they're launched, which is they've already sourced activities that volunteer opportunities that are needed in the community, and they're asking for folks to sign up on one of the many already existing volunteer program and
Right.
opportunities.
I think that's wonderful. I say we sort of coordinate or talk to them and see if what's being done already satisfies, whatever problem we're trying to solve here. Okay. All righty. Anything else on that? Okay. So the last item in old business, Carmen, if you still want to move forward with this, it would be an Ellis Pond cleanup update.
Yeah, I do still want to move forward with it. Let me get to my notes here. I put something in the packet. So I think that EC and Marianne, you can help me with this. It was in July when using the not pesticide, but the algicide in Ellis Pond came up. Was that July? Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay, I think it was in July. Saying all that to say, since that point, we've had a lot of feedback and heard a lot of community concerns. But I think that what EC kind of wanted to see happen was that we could move forward with the least problematic, whether it was or not, according to some people's opinions, it wasn't, the least problematic way to start to take care of the Ellis Pond problem, or the issues with the pond. So consequently, fast forward a couple months, we had a pretty comprehensive report from Dr. Veda Bakor, who is, she says she has her PhD in pond scum. And the report basically stated that in spite of what the pond looked like aesthetically, the pond was not anoxic except for a little bit in the northern end. There was the dissolved gases were where they should be. There was plenty of oxygen. There was not as much nitrogen as anybody expected. And there was an abundance of fish and fauna and other wildlife. It looks like a healthy pond, except for people don't like the way that coontail looks, and people don't like the way that algae looks. It's not suspended algae. It's not toxic algae. It's just there. It's what a pond does. So that was kind of the gist of her report. Then I met with Dr. Ramanitharan Kandia from Central State, and Marianne did come out to one of those meetings. He he runs the program. He runs their water resources management program at Central State. His findings were the same, that there was a lot of coontail, a lot of overgrowth of plants, some overgrowth of algae, but there was nothing dead in the pond. We didn't have to be concerned about a fish kill. We didn't have to be concerned about losing frogs, turtles, or any other animals. But it made it hard to kind of recreate at the pond because of all the plants in the pond, even though people use the pond every day for fishing and whatnot. Fast forward to another meeting we had with Dr. Ramanitharan toward the end of September. He suggested that because we go into dormancy in the fall with plants, that removing any plant material or attempting to move any plant material manually would kind of be in vain, because if you would do it when it was warm and the plants were proliferating, then they would just continue to produce. So that's why, from his recommendation, we decided to wait until mid-fall, which is now. So getting to where we are now. I also reached out to YSI, which is a Xylem brand now, and they have a program that's called the Watermark Program. It is an initiative, it's a corporate initiative where all of their branches, so YSI and any other Xylem branch, is required to do a community service involving improvement of bodies of water and water quality. I met with Brooke Obringer and Socrates Canet. Socrates is a chemist at Xylem. Brooke is the buyer. We walked the pond. Socrates suggested remote monitoring of gases and nutrients. And also, we talked about removal and repair of the aerators and then manual cleanup initially of the northern end of the pond. They have agreed to do that initial work, and on on October 27th, there'll be a work day. So engineers from Xylem and Drs. Veda Bakor and Dr. Ramanithiran will be at the pond on the 27th to start that initial phase. And waiting until the plant material is dormant ensures that we're not going to have a lot of proliferation. So that's where we are with that. Is there anything I need to add?
Well, I think that that Xylem said that they need to have permission from the village government in order to do that. So we were going to raise that up and get council to yay or nay, I guess.
Yeah.
With
So on the 27th, and I got the specs from village manager, I think in September, to send over to Xylem so they could look at it to see if something that they would want to do. And they agreed that not only would they like to do it, but they're kind of required to do it because of the corporate watermark initiative. And they have the expertise to do it. So we're asking permission from the village.
Yes, and it's my understanding that Xylem, through this program, is potentially willing to have this be an ongoing program that they would do. And also, you wanted to get pond rakes. Did you want to do that too? So that is an expense that we need to get approved by council as well.
So, but we don't have any of this in writing, right? We're just, I mean, I saw something in the minutes, but right.
So the only thing that we have in writing is the communication between, I don't know, EC, Xylem, me, Xylem, and Marion kind of started a report, and I was gonna get it in there, but what do we need?
Well, Brian, were you asking about Carmen's report being in the packet or something else?
So here's what we would like. One, we would like council to approve that the watermark program from Xylem can work on Ellis Pond, including removing the aerators and servicing them, and also including working at removing some of the vegetation at the north end of the pond. And they have said that they need to have village permission in order to do that. The other thing was getting materials, which would be pond rakes, 5 pond rakes. I don't know what the cost of those are, but that could come out of the EC budget, and there's definitely money in the EC budget to do that.
So certainly council, when it comes to spending money, we would weigh in, but Brian, Josue, Judy, do we feel like permission for them to get in the water is a council thing?
That is, so what you would probably want to do as council is empower the village manager to talk to Xylem to be able to set that up, because there are some legal implications. They have to have a policy in place for volunteer work.
They do.
There's all the stuff. So that would be, if council is supportive, they would say, Josue, we'd like you to start those conversations and see if that's feasible. And then that would involve, solicitor as needed.
We need to have a resolution to get to that point? No? Okay.
Okay, so see if this works. I would like council to vote on agreeing to empower the village manager to work with, would it be Brooke?
It would probably be there.
With the appropriate person at Xylem to arrange for their watermark volunteers to do work at Ellis Pond.
Was that a?
And I'm making that motion.
Okay.
A second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
Okay, so I want to briefly say, I'm going to vote to support this, but the problem with just adding these things onto an agenda without anything in writing and without any coordination with our village team, I mean, and that has happened with other situations as well, it puts us in a situation where, I mean, it's really kind of hard to vote on that because we don't really have anything in front of us other than, yeah, of course, YSI Xylem is awesome. And, but this to me is not an appropriate way to approach this. And,
I do want to say, like, really quickly, I mean, it's clear that I don't have experience up here. And also, I did reach out to village manager and ask him for the specs. And I told him, I stated in the email that Brooke Obringer was going to bring the specs before people who were interested and capable of doing that work. And that was in September. And so what I did was I did that. So the email's there, and I asked for the specs. And I asked for the specs with the specific purpose of volunteers from the Watermark program who were engineers to look at the specs, to prepare to maintain or perform maintenance on the aerators.
I did get the email, I provided the specs, but I was not aware of this October 27th deadline. I have a medical procedure on Wednesday and I expect to be out Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I'm scheduled to be on vacation starting the 22nd. I'll be working through vacation to make sure I deliver on the 2 deliverables I have for the 27th, and that is Finance Committee obligations and budget obligations. I've disclosed at the last council meeting that I was taking vacation starting October 22nd. So it really puts me up in a bit of a bind to figure out. I don't know all the work that's entailed. I haven't touched base with the attorney about insurance and what other requirements we're going to need for this work. So it does come at a difficult time for me and the team, as tomorrow we blocked off the entire day to do budget stuff.
Right,
So,
and if we're honest, I mean, council didn't really weigh in on this, right? So, certain people went forward with things, but we never sort of said move forward with this.
Council gave it to EC.
Yes, council gave EC permission to work on finding a way to deal with the situation. And as you know, we have not developed a satisfactory method of working with staff and the Environmental Commission. So that raises, and yes, I agree, this should have been in writing.
But you remember, when we do, like, say, commissions look at this, it's always with the assumption that it's going to come back to council. So, I mean, coming back to council this way, I just want everybody to realize it puts everyone in a difficult situation. And so, I mean, this just underscores there's a bigger issue here to resolve around communications. So, okay, but I don't know where that leaves us, but I guess a vote has been asked for, so.
All right, so there is a motion and a second on the floor. If there is no other discussion,
yeah, I mean, I was not aware that there would need to be a lot of communication back and forth between our staff and Xylem in order for them to do this. I'm not clear if they have their own insurance, which they do, clear, I mean, that's what they.
International company,
I don't know
they
that
do
we
this all
want to
the
get
time.
into that debate, but there's village-owned equipment in the pond. There's a lot, to be considered. So, you know, I would say if what you're voting is to say, can Josue take it on, and he can or he can't based on his time, but what you're saying is, we'd like you to, if you can swing this, and then the rest is gonna get, you know, put before staff, and I'm sure everyone will try to do their best with it, but no, it can't just be handed over to Xylem to take care of the pond without pretty extensive staff involvement and preparation.
So I guess really my next question would be, is that something that, like, there's a conversation with, the lead needs to have a conversation with, because I was, you know, we were talking and it was like, well, you know, we do this all the time everywhere else. And that's, I don't know. I was just trying to make connections and get something done.
Well, I'm sure that they do, and I'm sure that they have those conversations with the people they need to have those conversations with before they go in. And I do think things can be done, and maybe part of what happens is that, you know, another date has to be found because this is coming up too quickly. I don't think this all needs to be thrown out. I think it's just, you know, you were trying to get some stuff done, and now you've got new information that, this is going to take a little, maybe needs a couple more steps, but let's get it in the mix. Get in the mix and see what happens.
I was under the impression that when everything that happened regarding the pond happened, that council gave it to EC to handle.
My impression, and I was also under the impression that staff said, EC, we don't want to have anything to do with this. So, but I would like to pull that, I would like to not have that vote, and I would just like to have a conversation so that now staff knows, council knows that this is in the works, and if it's not going to work on that date, because, I mean, I don't want to put Josue in a position where he has to be doing things more than what he's doing, but if we can't do it now, then it could happen at a later date, and maybe it'll have to be in the spring, I don't know, but I would like to not have the vote. I don't know technically if I can do that or not.
I will not call a vote.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Johnny's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just need to know an answer because I've already got the pump guy. I notified him 2 weeks ago to put me on the schedule to pull the pumps. So am I pulling the pumps, not pulling the pumps? If I'm lost because they got to come out before the first freeze.
Oh, well.
This is normally a situation where they pull the pumps, they go through them, and they actually house them, and then they put them back at the first bit of spring.
And that's part of our weatherization efforts during the winter. We do it with a pool. We pull the valves. We shut off our water fountains. We pull the valves so things don't freeze. And so the pumps are part of that weatherization effort that we do throughout the village to ensure that equipment survives winter and we're able to use it.
Okay. Yeah, I think what this underscores is, I think we all want to get stuff done, but we have to work as a team and collaborate and coordinate because there are a lot of moving parts. And if we're all acting as free agents, that's going to create problems. So I don't like the idea of saying that I mean, all council members, I think, would like to just whatever, got an idea, I want to get it done, but we got to work through a process, and that's a challenge of government, but it doesn't mean that these aren't all good things. But once connections are made, there's got to be these follow through steps.
And Brian, for my clarity, when you first mentioned or first asked the question, did we have this in writing? Were you referring to the report, the update?
Sure. I mean, like the things that we're hearing now, like, you need to have it in writing, and then we need to understand, what what YSI is going to do. But again, we also need to have that coordination with the team that's responsible for our, village properties and activities.
Yeah. So I would submit, regardless of what happens with, EC and Xylem, that Johnny would move forward with, the annual weatherization plans, and the pumps are going to get pulled. Johnny, when are you looking at that to happen?
It's scheduled for this end of the week. And if we want to pull the pumps and take them back to the farm, and then somebody make a decision on who's going to go through them, who's going to rebuild them, normally they take them back and they do all that and they go through the whole process because they put them back in the early spring. I just need to make sure who's doing what process. That's the only thing I'm asking.
Yeah.
So really quickly, not to make anything more complicated than it has to be anymore, but so Xylem is prepared to come in and pull the pumps without cost to the village. And so if they deliver them to you, I mean, that can be an option too. So, or the pump guys can. We just need to have a different conversation. I'm prepared to write something with Rebecca Potter, the chair of EC, and Marianne, a phase by phase plan, because it's together, but it's not together in one place. And that's where I failed. But
Carmen, if I can say, the reason why we have the pump guy pull it, and I don't care who pulls them, is we don't have to have them at our facility anytime. They house them, they go through them over the winter and all that. So if Xylem pulls them, I would want them to keep them. That way I ain't got to try to house them and then schedule somebody to come back.
So if they were to pull them and keep them and fix them.
And then they could put them back in the spring. I just need to know who's doing what.
Okay.
And if it means that you want me to have them pulled this time, I can have them pulled. I just got to be able to cancel them if we're not going to do it the same way.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it sounds like in the next day or so, there needs to be some bounce off of the Xylem folks. And Johnny, you have like 3 things that happen that you're satisfied with. They get pulled, they get maintained, they get stored.
Absolutely.
And whether it costs you 10 cents or whatever, that's what you want to have done. Correct. And so if Xylem can do those things plus anything extra, great. But I think if you fall short of that, we're going to be introducing maintenance issues down the road.
And Kevin, one of the main reasons why we don't install them, because we're not the experts, or we're not the pump people. Plus, I wouldn't put any of my people in a kayak to try to put them in there. It's not really their job, and I wouldn't want to put them out there.
Right.
Well, I mean, as far as Xylem or YSI goes, that's all they do. I mean, they know what they're doing. So, I mean,
they build pontoons for a living.
Yeah, well, I'm.
Xylem does, by the way.
Right. So yeah, so Donnie, I'm saying if Xylem can do exactly what you expect to be done, because you made a call and you know what's going to happen at the end of this week. They're going to get.
I just texted the guy. We're on the schedule for Thursday morning.
Okay. So I'd say by Wednesday morning.
To be honest with you, Kevin, I either got to tell him now to cancel it. I would prefer just to go ahead and have him do it. He's done it for the last 2 years.
Okay.
And then we can, once this whole thing with Xylem gets squared away, we can transition back to Xylem.
All right. So thank you, everyone. I think we're done. Your guy's going to do what he needs to do. Carmen, I think we just need more information. You and Marianne, y'all can, sort of not codify, but, get something in front of us when there's something for us to read or make a decision about. Please do that. But with respect to engaging Xylem with the pumps, those pumps right now, Johnny's folks are going to pull them. And so then there just needs to be some conversation about what next steps are. Okay. Is there anything else on the update, on the Ellis Pond cleanup update? All righty. Any new business? We didn't bring up at the beginning, so I'm going to submit, we have none. Were there anything, I mean, that was almost a EC commission update, but are there any other commission or board report updates that anyone has?
Yes, I have two. So at our last council meeting, it was suggested by Josue and Brian, I guess, that we do Earth Day at the Bryan Center. So I brought that to EC and we agreed that that made sense to do that. So I will work, I'm not sure who I need to talk to, but those dates are April, the 23rd would be the Earth Day and the 30th would be a rain date. So I'll work with whomever I need to work with about that. Then there was also a mediation update report. As I mentioned a couple meetings ago, Diane Diller is now the new coordinator of the mediation program, and she is like going great guns. And she has set up November 16th as a meet and greet, and we will all get invitations for that. I also submitted a budget request because the mediation program for the last couple years has sort of not done a lot. And Diane is about doing stuff. So we want to have some trainings next year for the community, and in the report I listed potential trainings that we would have. So I had submitted a budget request that'll I'll bring to our when we're working on our budget, but just wanted to bring both of those things up.
Thank you very much.
There's a PAC. Public Arts and Culture Commission awarded the fall Vita to the Kreskis, David Mader, and Nasim Sajabi. There was a little library at Gaunt Park that has a roof and shingles, and the library supported that effort. So I just wanted to congratulate them for receiving the Vita, and that was on Friday.
Great, thank you. Any other board and commission updates? All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, sorry. So Judy, I'm sorry. Am I supposed to? Okay. Okay.
I felt
there was
Judy.
a planning commission meeting, but then there's some changes, and so.
Yeah, just.
No, I don't know. I had sent a
earth-shattering.
report, but it wasn't. I didn't. Anyway, everything's fine.
Yeah, yeah. If there was something earth shattering in there, report one
I mean,
nugget.
it's actually a pretty big project for the village, so I think it is worth, when it's appropriate to talk about. But it's anyway. That's why I want to talk about it. I don't know, earth shattering, but it'll be the biggest development that's happened in Yellow Springs in quite some time.
It will be.
I mean, seriously, like in terms of housing development.
Oh, and sure, yeah.
It's earth shattering.
That's literally, no pun intended, earth shattering. All right, okay. Y'all sleep on it. All right, future agenda items.
Okay, so this is where, yeah, we're updating it. So council will not be hearing the final plat on November the 7th because DDC needs to come in phases. So they need to take the final plat back to Planning Commission for approval to do it in a three-phase approach rather than a one burst approach, which delays it and gets it to you December 5th. So I've updated the agenda to reflect that. So that's off for November 7th. You do have a request for an AMP rate study presentation. And you'll have an ordinance for amending solid waste rates. I think the rest of it's on your.
It says first reading on busking, but that would be the second reading on November 7th?
Yours must not have gotten updated. I updated a couple of things today.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the old one again. Gosh.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So just for the thing that you brought about mediation, so just to make sure we're on the same page, is that the level of detail that is expected, or, so that was a good thing. You're saying, hey, here's $10,000 to pay for this mediation program. We talked about our goals and talked about broad concepts. I'm just trying to figure out, is there a point at which there are supposed to be, here's the exact dollar amount of the things that we want to see happen that comes forth?
Boards and commissions generally submit something for the budgeting process that says, here is what we intend to spend money on in these amounts for the next year. And I will say that with the exceptional amount of scrutiny provided by the Auditor of State, that is going to need to be very delineated. You absolutely need to say, these are the dollars, this is what they will be spent on for that process. That's just a heads up that I've gotten. So yes, council, no, I don't know that you need to be specifically this exact dollar amount, but boards and commissions, yes, I would highly recommend it.
So then, like Carmen, if we wanted to talk about potential PAC expenditures, we should prepare something to bring, and then all of these expenditures, along with the roads that need fixed and so everything that's on the budget will then be considered, and then we'll be figuring out which things make it in the budget and which things don't. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm just making sure I understand the process. Thank you.
Yeah, and with PAC, for example, if you guys have not seen the past examples of what have been submitted, Judy can get that to you, because that's come from the commissions each year. I will say in the past, that sometimes hasn't happened until the following year. But with our push to try to define what we're spending for events and everything else on the front end, the earlier the better.
That would be helpful, Judy, because I've certainly I don't know what they would look like.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And then we can check in about it.
I have one question. In the well, not in the packet, I guess. Brian sent it. The information about the work that was done on potentially changing committee structures.
Yeah.
That came into the packet. That wasn't anything we talked about at this meeting. It is something I'm interested in talking about. I don't know when that would happen, but given that it came in the packet, I assume Brian, did you have some intention of putting it on a future agenda or what?
Yeah, because we had actually talked about it at the last meeting about bringing that back. And it was in relation to, we've established a finance committee, and that, maybe this would be a better way to make sure that some of this work ahead of the meeting is done. So I think we should talk about it at the next meeting.
Okay. Any other agenda items for future meetings? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second. All right.
Oh, I don't know.
Say aye.
We could just hang out here a little longer.
Meeting adjourned.
All right.
You guys.
All right.